All right. Yo, yo, yo. This is another edition of the Find Flow podcast. I am your host, Andrew, and joining me today is my very special guest, my good friend, Lawrence. Lawrence, how you doing, my man?
I'm good, man. I like the intro. I'm digging the
Thank
intro.
you, man. Thank you, bro. Well, yeah, I'm happy to be here, or I'm happy to have you here. Sorry, and super excited to chop it up with you and just get a little bit more background on what it is that you're all about. And yeah, I was actually doing a deep dive into your Instagram as I do with all my guests, and there's something I didn't actually realize about you. And I don't know if you still um prescribe to this, but you are plant-based, correct?
I was. I was.
You
It's in,
were? Okay, okay.
yeah, my whole journey into this um, holistic health lifestyle came from first experimenting things myself and
Mhm,
seeing what works best for me. So in 2017, I started with the plant-based diet, and
mhm,
that lasted for about 2 years. And I was experimenting a bunch of stuff with food and nutrition, how to kind of have a well balanced diet without eating any meat, no eggs, no fish.
mhm,
That was the beginning of my journey on here on on social media, actually
mhm,
on Instagram. And so I was kind of posting my experiments of plant-based diet, kind of where I'm getting my protein, where am I getting my omega 3s, for example, because I'm not eating
mhm,
fish. So I had to
mhm,
think, okay, where am I going to get my omega 3s from plants? And so I would post that on Instagram, and kind of people that were on a similar journey where we're chatting and helping each other out. And so, yeah, that was the start in 2017, and it lasted for 2 years.
mhm,
And I got quite a bit of feedback from eating that way, and I've learned a lot. But since then, I've reintroduced meat, fish back into my diet,
mhm.
and yeah, I've been going from there since. So that was kind of experimental stages to find out what's
Yeah.
nutritional um, lifestyle worked best for me, like being
Mhm,
an active person and working full time, all these kind of things had to come together and
mhm.
work for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've introduced meat back since 2019 now.
Nice. Okay, okay. And what are some of the things that you found or what came up for you during your 2-year journey in plant as a plant-based eater?
I've noticed a lot of things. So one thing that I've noticed quite a bit is that it was a detox for me, in a
Mm,
sense that when you eat a lot of processed foods and meats, they tend to be heavy in toxins and
mm,
byproducts from meat that reside in your body. And so when I found,
mhm,
when I was on a plant-based diet, I felt much lighter, not only physically but mentally as well. I felt like
mhm,
I wasn't as cloudy anymore, and so I was able
mhm.
to detox a lot of crap that I built up over the years
Right.
and system. So and yeah, so that's the main health component that came for me from the plant-based diet. But then there was also the whole um, environmental aspect of how food plays a role in the environment and how it affects the whole system. So I was able to learn that from the plant-based diet. Uh,
Mm,
you see a lot of vegans; they're proponent of the environmental factors and
absolutely. Yeah.
affects the environment, the human body. So
Mhm.
yeah, that was my journey with the plant-based diet.
Got you, got you. Yeah, and I noticed, you know, aesthetically, you still maintained your physique. Like you were still ripped and like you had decent size on you too, right? So like what was that like in terms like how did what are some of the changes that you noticed in regards to your training? Like I know some people, and this might not be the same across the board, but some people said that they were stronger. Other people said that they were weaker as a result of not having meat in their diet, and like so could like speak to that a little bit.
That's pretty interesting because at
Mhm,
first, part of the experiment of a plant-based diet was to see if I could maintain my muscle mass and even increase it along with the
mhm,
strength. And so for the first year or so, I'd say it was amazing because I felt the benefits of the detox from having a
mhm,
plant-based diet, not eating a lot of meat and fish and processed food. So I felt
mhm,
like my body was purging a lot of things. And at the
Mhm.
same time, I was experimenting with um, the balance ratios of where I could find like good quality carbs, where can I find good quality fat, so I can sustain
Mhm.
my training and lifestyle that I would do,
Mhm.
which is still lifting weights. I was very active. I'd go to the gym like 3, 4 times a week,
Yeah.
lifting weights, playing sports, doing calisthenics, all that sort of thing. And
Mhm.
so it's very much possible to increase muscle mass on a plant-based diet, because the myth of not having enough protein, I think, is not necessarily true. But what
Mhm.
people don't realize is that protein is not the only thing that comes into play when it comes to strength and muscle mass and health in general.
Mhm.
And so over time, I found that that's after about a year of plant-based diet, I noticed that
Mhm.
my energy levels and strength wasn't as good as when I used to eat meat and fish
Mm.
more.
Mhm.
And so I was able to gain muscle mass. I looked lean, I looked good, but at the same time, I felt like I wasn't reaching my full potential still. Something was
Mm.
missing,
Mhm.
nutritional um, input that
Mhm.
would prevent me from like lifting the amount of weights that I used to lift or having the same energy levels that I used to have. And so 2 years after the plant-based diet, that's when I kind of like, okay, hold on. I've been on plant-based for like 2 years now. Let me try some new things now and
Mhm.
slowly weight meat back again and kind of
Right.
see how my body reacts and feels with the meat
Mhm.
now that I've detoxed a
Mhm.
lot of things
Mhm.
in my body. And so when I reintroduced meat, I gotta say, I reintroduced meat that's really good quality. So before,
Mhm.
just your regular type of meat from the grocery store that was raised with antibiotics and hormones, meat, um, uh, chickens raised in cages and all that stuff. But when I
Mhm.
reintroduced that, I was very conscious about the quality of the meat I would consume. So I would
Mhm.
consume organ meats. I would eat bone broth and wild caught fish. So
Mhm.
I didn't have as much toxins as the meat that I used to eat. And
Mhm.
so I kept it. Since I reintroduced it back, I kept it because I found that my energy levels would go through the roof and
Mhm.
my physical would also improve. And so, yeah, that's where I'm at.
That's awesome, man. I really respect the long stretch of time that you took to embark on that experiment because, some people will talk about or like they will dismiss, a plant-based diet without actually doing the research. They'll just go and they'll read something about it and then be like, "Oh, okay, well, this article says this and this about it, so therefore it must be the gospel truth, right?" Whereas, people who actually do the experiment, and everyone's body is different and everyone's going to respond differently to it, right? So I know some people who are thriving off of, a plant-based diet and going the vegan route and are, just as strong as they ever were, right? Whereas, some people, they tried, not really for them. And then I know other people that are on like the carnivore diet where it's like all meat, right? And are thriving off of that too, right? So I think it's all kind of like a case by case basis, right? I mean, if you're doing it for ethical reasons, that's different, but you know, from your perspective, it,
That's,
it
yeah,
it's
that's
changes.
exactly it. When it comes to health in the human body, like you said, it's all so individual,
Mhm,
depending on your background, depending on your genetics. Certain
mhm,
people might react better with certain foods, while others might it might damage them. Right? For
mhm,
example, if you take people that grew up in the north, like the Inuit people, what
mhm.
they eat mostly is meat and fat, like high quality
Yeah.
fat. They don't have a lot of crops growing in the snow, and so they would consume like seal fat and birds and penguins and
Mhm.
all that stuff, and they would be super healthy all their lives. But if you
Right.
take that Inuit person and you put them in a American type diet and you introduce more plants and foods that they're not used to up north, they would
Mhm,
react entirely differently from
mhm.
somebody who grew up in that environment. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
part of it was experimenting for myself because there's so much contradictory information. Like you hear carnivore diet is amazing, it cures disease, blah, blah, blah. People are
Mhm,
feeling great. And then on the other hand, you hear plant based is the way to go and eating
mhm,
meat is horrible. And so the only thing really is experimenting for yourself and really finding how your body responds to it. Part of the work
Right.
I found is building an awareness good enough so that you can see how you react to certain foods.
Mhm.
So my journey was, I cold turkey stopped any type of meat product when I embarked on the plant based journey.
Mhm.
But when I reintroduced the meat back, I reintroduced it like slowly, one by one, sort of thing, to see how
Right.
my body would react to
Mhm. Yeah.
different types of food. And so, yeah, by experimenting in that way, I was able to find like what my body thrives best on, what kind of
Right.
food allow me to have the best sleep, um, yada yada yada.
Yeah. Yeah, it's similar to the effect of like an elimination diet when you're trying to find like what kind of foods causes an intolerance in your body, right? Kind of thing, right? Like I had to do that for myself when I had a stomach ulcer. I had to stop all the foods that were potentially exacerbating those reactions in my body and then reintroducing them gradually after I kind of purged myself of those for a while. So um yeah, I think that's a very smart way to do it in terms of reintroducing meat and just getting a better sense of how your body responds to things that you're putting inside your system, right? So,
Precisely, yeah. And I've
yeah.
used the elimination diet for myself as well because I've had
Mhm.
troubles with my sinuses and breathing was quite hard, and
Mhm.
especially for the work that I do with it involves a lot of breath work stuff, and so having a
Mhm.
clogged sinuses, it gets in the way of
Yeah.
everything. So I did
Mhm.
elimination to kind of see, okay, what am I reacting to? I had a sense that it was something in the food. It was
Mhm.
probably gluten.
Mhm.
So anyway, but yeah, I played with a similar
Mhm.
strategy. Well,
Okay, okay. And now in terms of your diet now, like are you generally the type of person to like track your macros and your like your macro ratios and like your calories and stuff like that? Or are you kind of just like on a whim? Do you just eat whatever like you eat based off of how you feel?
yeah, so I used to do that. I'm not gonna lie. I started by
Mhm.
tracking my how much protein I'd get, how much calories, how much fat, how
Mhm.
much carbs, and that was mainly to during my experiments with the plant-based diet because
Mhm.
I didn't know as much where to get the replacements for meat. You could say like
Mhm.
where to get the protein and how much plant-based foods do I need to get similar um, amount that I would get from meat. So
Mhm.
that's what I would track so that I could get a sense of visual idea of how much needs to be on my plate while
Mhm.
I'm. But nowadays, it's all purely intuitive. I just listen to my
Mhm.
body and go with the changes of seasons. Like I noticed that
Mhm.
in summer, I tend to crave certain things like fruits and more greens, so I eat that.
Mhm.
In time, I tend to fast a little bit more and eat more fats, kind of thing. So I
Mhm.
just my body and go based on that. I find that
Mhm.
the body has this innate knowing of what it needs in terms of
Mhm.
nutrients, and it
Yeah.
communicates to us via subtle things like cravings or yeah. So that's what I try to do nowadays. So I don't count macros at
Mhm.
all.
Right. Right.
But I
And you're
feel like
still
yeah, I
no,
feel
go
like
ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, I feel like most of my knowledge, a lot of the knowledge came from counting calories and
Mm.
macros because
Yeah.
I would get a visual idea of how much, what's a good balance of like carbs, proteins, and fats per day,
Mhm.
and I would get a good sense of what foods would contain which nutrient, so that way I can
Mhm.
kind of craft a balanced meal on each meal.
Mhm.
So that was the beginning stages, but now it kind of ingrained and it became more intuitive.
Yeah. Yeah, and I appreciate that too because I for me, I used to count my calories and my macros quite heavily, and, especially when I was in a bulking phase where I was trying to put on mass because I'm naturally a more slender person, so in order for me to gain mass, I have to kinda overeat in a sense, so tracking is kind of always been an on and off for me. But, I came to find that, through the intuitive nature and, like, bringing more awareness to, like, how my body feels, I realized that like I don't do well on like a high carb diet. Like I always got like digestive issues whenever my carbs were super high. And so I know now for me that I have to I thrive best on a moderate carbs, moderate to low carbs, and then like a high fat, moderate protein type of diet. So that's what I've been doing now, and it's been working great. I have no digestive issues anymore. So yeah.
That's
Where
amazing.
did that where did that intuitive nature for you in terms of like your ability to be more aware of like how your body is feeling come into play? Like have you always had that, or was that something that kind of just like developed over time? Like I know we all have an intuitive nature, but some people tend to tune it out or don't realize that they have it, and they're basing everything off of like, logic rather than just intuition.
Yeah, I've struggled with that quite a bit in the early um, experimental days because I'm
Mhm.
naturally a very logical person, and I
Mhm.
would tune out whatever my body would say, and I'd be
Mhm.
like, "Oh, but science says this is good for you, so I should eat
Mhm.
this. This would be good for me."
Mhm.
What do you mean, body? Like, you know? Yeah. So I'd be very logical, and I found that my awareness grew a lot more throughout the years. The more that I experimented, because the deeper you dive into the rabbit hole of health and nutrition and movement, the more you realize how many contradicting information and systems there are. So
Mhm.
some people would claim, oh, this is amazing for you. Other people would claim this is horrible for you.
Mhm.
You have these contradicting information that kind of fight with each other logically in your mind. So
Mhm.
the only thing that you're forced to do now is experiment yourself and actually see how your body feels.
Mhm.
And from the experimentations throughout the years, I was able to fine tune that connection with my body and
Mhm.
seeing what it feels, what it needs, how it reacts to certain things. And that's what I purely go by now. It's just that.
Mhm. That's awesome, man. I respect that. Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. So yeah, we relate on that. Um, let's shift gears a little bit and let's talk about like your training now, because you do a lot of I see on your Instagram you do a lot of like different things, right? So it's hard to peg what you're really interested what your main focus is, which is good because I think that as a athlete or as a mover, we should be exposed to a lot of different things, right? Kind of like it's what separates, like Ido Portal always says, it's what separates a specialist from a generalist, right? A specialist, focuses on one thing, whereas a generalist is immersed in a lot of different things that makes him an overall well-rounded athlete, right? So what is like walk us through like what your typical training looks like day to day.
Yeah, it's very interesting because it evolves all the time. And
Mhm.
maybe I'll start with my movement journey so that you get a better picture of the history that I have with
Mhm.
movement and how it came to be what it is now, which is
Mhm.
just pure chaos to the outside eye if they look at it. But yeah, I feel like the movement aspect kind of was always natural to me as a person, even
Mhm.
though I was in the like my career path was more in the scientific um, aspect, but on the side I was always moving. I was always playing sports. As a
Mhm.
kid, I was playing basketball for my high school team, and then I played a little bit in college and university. Then I got into bodybuilding, so that was my first encounter with weights and lifting weights outside of sports. I learned the art of bodybuilding. I did that for about 4 or 5 years, all self-taught, all
Mhm.
self-taught. But from doing bodybuilding in my early university years, I developed a lot of imbalances, like muscle
Mhm.
imbalances. And I reached a point where I was like 220 pounds and I felt super heavy. And I tried to play basketball again. I'm like, holy cow. Like I look amazing. I look amazing at the beach. I look jacked as hell, but
Yeah.
I can barely move. Like my
Mhm.
body feels so stiff. I can barely like scratch my back. And so, and I remember at one point I saw some really skinny guy at the gym and he was benching like 2 times the weight that I was. And mind you, I was a bodybuilder, and he was more of like a power lifter or Olympic trainer, whatever he was. But he was skinny, but he was lifting a lot of weight. And so that made me so self-conscious as a 220-pound and seeing this 150 or 60 pound
Yeah.
dude benching twice that I do. I'm like, wait a second, I'm doing something wrong. Like, I look good, yes, but I'm not strong and I can't move. So from the bodybuilding days, I started exploring powerlifting and strongman training. I did that for a couple of years. I lost some weight, I gained some strength. I started to feel better, but still I was stiff. I was strong now. I was strong, I was big, but I wasn't moving quite well or as well as I'd
Right.
like. And so that led me into movement practice in general, you would say. I discovered things like animal flow and Ido Portal kind of thing. And so it kind of merged into that. Ido Portal, animal flow, yoga, qigong, all these things kind of I started exploring at the same time that I began my plant-based journey. And from then on, ever since I started exploring, it just kind of branched out from there. I like to look at myself as just a movement practitioner. I explore different styles of movement, and I try to get one for myself so that I always keep learning with that beginner's mindset. Where was I going with this? Yeah, so I always keep learning, and it kind of just keeps expanding from there. So right now, what I do is a combination of all these things. So I still lift weights. I found that I got benefits from exploring a lot of these different disciplines. So from lifting weights, obviously there's the strength component, but it also affects your hormones and your general health as a man, as a human being. So I do weights, and on the other side, it's like my movement exploration kind of thing. So I don't go to your like the typical gym like Good Life. I signed up for at a gym called Shinobi Village. I don't know if you've heard
Oh
of it.
yeah, I'm familiar. I haven't gone there yet, but I've been meaning to go for a long time because I know they do like capoeira there and
Yeah,
all sorts
exactly.
of other stuff. Yeah.
A lot of different movement practices. It's an amazing gym. So they have weights. They have a whole parkour set up with obstacles. If you think about like Ninja Warrior training with a lot of obstacles and weights, and combine that with martial arts and dance and capoeira, that's kind of what the place is. And when I train nowadays, I have my sort of foundational basics that I do. So I lift weights, I do my mobility, I work on some skills that I want to develop, like handstands, or I'm working on splits right now. And in my session, I have free to kind of explore. So I play around the place and just try to tap into that inner child and creativity as a human being.
Right.
So yeah, that's what I use movement for. It's like my creative outlet. Now, it's not only
Right.
for and to look good and to be strong and to be all natural, but I use it to reconnect with my inner child, to kind of play around and forget about the stressors of life. Because when you're in at
Right.
a this, it's a whole playground. You play around and you forget about everything. So
Of course. Of
yeah,
course. Yeah.
that's what I do with movement now.
Yeah. And I see that you also integrate like dancing into your movement practice as well sometimes, which is really cool.
Yeah,
Like,
yes.
yeah.
The dancing actually came back even before I played basketball, because my first movement practice, you could call it, that would be dance. I started in, I think, 6th grade with sea walk.
Oh, no way.
Sea walk,
Yeah.
beginning of the YouTube days, I saw somebody sea
Yeah.
walk. It's the coolest thing ever. So I learned how
Yeah.
to sea walk, and from there, I transitioned into like popping and locking and hip hop. So I was dancing in the early elementary and high school days, but then that kind of faded away, and I started doing more bodybuilding and strength training and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I brought back movement again just a couple of years ago as a refresher, to have fun, to express myself. Yeah, I love dance. I love dance,
Yeah.
and I find that it's such a underutilized form of training
Mm-hmm.
in whatever movement style you practice, really. Because dance, if you think about it, it's like creative expression. You express
Mm-hmm.
yourself through dance, and it teaches you rhythm. It teaches you flow. It teaches
Mm-hmm.
you how to combine complex movements and make it like go to the rhythm of the music.
Mm-hmm.
I see dance like on the same wavelength as like martial arts. They kind of
Mm-hmm.
go hand in hand to develop your coordination, rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I love dance.
Yeah, I mean, dance is life for a lot of people, man. Like that's kind of my first introduction to movement as well. Like I was a dancer back in the day, and then it kind of evolved from there. So like whenever I see people like yourself that like integrate that into their practice, I'm always like, yo, that's nice, that like big ups
Yeah,
for that. So yeah, it's always cool and refreshing to see that, because it goes back to what you were saying of like tapping into that inner child, right? Like, you know, little kids, they love to dance, they love to be silly and everything like that. And I think as we age and we transition into adulthood, we lose a part of that innocence and that playful nature. And so this movement practice, if you will, allows us to reconnect with our childlike roots in that regard.
100%. It's so important.
Yeah.
'Cause, yeah, I think I saw a quote that said like most people die at 25. They just don't get buried until they're 70, something like that.
Yeah.
We get so
Yeah,
indoctrinated
man.
in the system. We go to school, we start working, we buy a house, start having a family, and so everything
Mhm.
starts becoming so serious. And so that's why you see so much mental illnesses nowadays, because people take
Mhm.
life way too seriously in general, and they don't
Mhm.
have that outlet to play and express themselves and connect with the things that their child self used to enjoy and appreciate.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
child never goes away.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. It just gets locked away for some people sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you said you're working on splits right now. Is that middle splits or front splits?
I'm working on my hips in general. I'm working on middle
Mhm.
splits more
Yeah.
specifically. It's because my hip mobility has always been super crappy, like
Mhm.
horrible. Because I was born with, first of all, pigeon toes, so my toes would be like this,
Mhm.
right? And the other thing I was born with, it's called bow legs. So the
Mm.
way my legs were structured, they were like, if you imagine my fingers are my legs, they were bent like this,
Yeah.
right? So they were in the shape of a bow.
Mhm.
And so ever since I was a kid, I did a lot of physiotherapy, kind of realign the structure of my legs and hips and all that stuff. And so even up until now, I'm working on that. And I've
Mm.
ignored mobility for a long time. Like through the bodybuilding and strength training career was all,
Mhm.
yeah, I barely worked on my hip mobility. So now I'm playing the catch up game. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Myself included, man. Like, because, you know, we always, when we're younger, we always want the showy muscles, right? When we neglect those like intricate muscles that play a really pivotal role in our overall movement ability, right? And so we pay the price later on in life from all the years of neglect, right? So, yeah.
Yeah.
What's your, yeah, yeah, go ahead.
Now I was gonna say first we have to get the big pecs and biceps, and then now
Yeah.
we can actually do the things that we need to work on.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah. What is it? So aside from the middle splits, what other skills or goals do you have in mind that you're working on? Like, what do you like? Where do you want to see yourself in terms of your movement ability, or just whatever it is that you're doing currently going into 2022?
My goal is to be like a jack of all trades with movement. Like
Mm,
I don't see myself as a specialist like you mentioned. My goal is to get my body into a position that it's strong, it's well mobile. I can move around my environment really well. I can navigate the environment, and by training myself to be a general good mover, and so that means working on my weaknesses as I am now. So for example, I can't lift my legs too much to the side because of the limitations of my hip mobility. So I'm working on splits in order to have more range with my legs, kind of thing. You know, and by being a good mover, you're like standing at the center of any type of movement practice. So if you want to move into martial arts, your body is ready, and it's ready enough to be specialized now in martial arts, or it's ready enough now to advance the dancing practice, or you're good enough of a mover to go back and play basketball. You're good enough of a mover to kind of conduct the everyday lifestyle type of things that require you to live, run, and bend and climb trees. So yeah, that's how I see movement. I don't have a necessarily a goal by 2022. It's always like little milestones that I set myself over time. So like now I'm working on splits. Once I achieve that, I'll have another goal that I'm going to be working on, depending on weaknesses that I find in my body. Yeah, that's how I go. I kind of have, so I have the basics. Like the weightlifting is the basic for me. Lifting heavy weights, I feel much better mentally and physically when I do that. I know that my hormones are more balanced. I have a better sleep with weights, so that's a non-negotiable for me. But everything else is kind of working on weaknesses and getting my body to that center state of movement, you could say. It can be specialized in any way that's desirable. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it totally does. It totally does. Definitely. Like, yeah. And what do you do for recovery? Like in turn, like with all the training that you do, how do you balance that out?
So I don't train every day. I lift weights like 3 to 4 times a week. And in terms of all the other stuff that I do, so yeah, I should say I lift weights 3 or 4 times a week. So that's that. But every day I do some sort of movement while I'm at home. Either if I'm working from my computer or it's my day off, I still do some kind of movement. So my recovery days, I would call them the days that I'm not lifting weights, because that's the one that's taxing my system the most. Makes sense. So on the days that I lift weights, I would do all the other stuff like mobility and calisthenics and parkour. On the days that I don't go to the gym and lift weights, I would do things like mobility and slow yoga or some qigong, some shaking, kind of active recovery.
Right.
Nothing taxing on the body. So it's very intuitive now. It's very intuitive. Before it used to be very structured. I would have the exact dates that I would train. I would have my exact dates for recovery. But now I try to add movement almost every day. And recovery is very intuitive as well. Like I would lift weights one day and the next day it's like, oh, I'm feeling way too sore, so I'm just gonna go easy today. I'm gonna do some shaking, a little easy mobility flow, maybe go for a walk in nature. So I would listen to my body a lot when it comes to training and nutrition.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then do you have any like daily rituals that you do like as a primer to kind of get you like either in the zone for your training, or just like a primer for getting your day started in general?
So I've experimented with that too. I've experimented with primer, but nowadays it's also quite intuitive. I found that when I had a structured morning routine, as a lot of people have, I wouldn't stick to it for too long, just because my schedule is so different. And me working at the hospital before, it would be a mixture of day shift and night shift. And so my sleep schedule and my body's timing would be all over the place.
Mhm.
So you'd be working 12 hours at the hospital from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. 2 days of the week, and then the other
Mhm.
2 days of the week, I would do night shifts, so from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. So I would sleep
Mhm.
all day. So it would be all over the place. So that's why I haven't kept a routine or ritual per se.
Mhm.
Um, but nowadays, I've been thinking about reintegrating it back.
Mhm.
So when I was experimenting with my morning routine, I would do something like I would wake up, I would first thing in the morning, I would meditate for a few minutes, 10 to 15 minutes, then I would journal and get some movement, and then finally start my day. So that would be my
Mhm.
primer.
Mhm.
And I should reintegrate it back. That's been a while.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I'm of two minds on the whole primer thing. Like I agree that, there is a lot of value and benefit from having like a morning ritual or a nighttime ritual and things of that nature. But to your point, also, like I know for me, like whenever I have morning rituals or whatever, I'm not always consistent with it. And when I'm not consistent with it, I feel bad about myself. Like I feel like I've failed the day. And for me, that kind of takes me out of flow because when I hear the word flow, it's like a push and pull for me in terms of how I define it, right? Um, it's between rigidity and fluidity, right? Whereas when you're too much into a schedule and you're too fixed on like a regiment, I feel like you're leaning more to rigidity, where it's like there's no area for leniency, and like when you break out of that, or when you break out of your fixed routine, it almost feels like it's like you condemn yourself for it. Whereas like I think sometimes having a nice flow, like sometimes, like I'll admit, like sometimes I don't always meditate daily. Like, sometimes I'll do it intuitively when my body calls for it, when I feel like I need to be more introspective and more reflective. And then, I'll stick with it for a while and then do it on like as need basis, and then kind of go back and forth with it. And I feel like that kind of works for me, but I understand some people's need to be more rigid with it. So yeah.
I've been the same as you. Yeah, I've been the same. I've
Mm,
tried both methods. I've tried the rigid one, and I feel like
yeah.
if I had a schedule that was like consistent, 9 to 5,
Hmm.
Monday to Friday, and weekends off,
Yeah.
I feel like I would benefit quite a bit from a routine like this. But now it's like my schedule's all over the place. One day I might do
Hmm.
this at this time, the other day I have to do this at this time. So
Hmm.
yeah, like you said, I benefit way more from that again intuitive approach. That way you're not beating
Hmm.
yourself up.
Yeah, I think it's more of a thing of like just making sure that you do find time as often as you possibly can for yourself. And that can be in the morning, that could be midday, or it can be sometime at night. But as long as you're not neglecting yourself and your needs, then I think you're all right. If you kind of are a little bit more wishy-washy with your daily rituals. All right.
Exactly. I agree. I
Yeah.
agree. It might
Yeah.
it might change. It might change, right? Right now we're
Yeah.
more intuitive, and then we might find ourselves slacking a bit. So we're like, okay,
Yeah.
I gotta really get myself on a schedule back again,
Hmm. Yeah.
track back, and so it goes up and down all the time, right? It's
Yeah.
like the
Yeah.
training. You'd be training and advancing for a lot of months. It's like, yeah, I'm improving, I'm getting better, and some months you're
Hmm.
like I'm stagnant, or I'm like going down.
Hmm. Yeah.
Just part of the journey.
Absolutely. Yeah. I also noticed on your Instagram that you're somewhat of an anime fan.
Yeah.
Like I've seen a lot of Dragon Ball influences, and you've posted a couple of like Avatar stuff. So like what made you like how long have you been into anime, and like what are some of your favorite animes, and why what's the appeal for you?
Yeah, I grew up with anime, being a 90s baby.
Mhm.
Uh, I grew up with like Dragon Ball Z and
Mhm.
Inuyasha and all these animes on YTV. And
Mhm.
ever since I was a kid, I connected to those animated movies a lot more than the actual
Mhm.
real life movies or shows because I found that like a lot of things were exaggerated in animes. They had a lot of deep meaning.
Yeah.
There was a lot of lessons behind in animes. Like if people are willing to sit down and look and read between the lines, there's a lot you can learn. Dragon Ball, like this stupid kid Goku, like he just goes and takes on the biggest challenge, gets his ass whooped, but he doesn't think back on it. He just goes back to train and comes back better. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, there was. I love anime just because of the depth of it, the everything, entertainment. Yeah, so that kind of carried out to adulthood and now, and I still watch all the new ones. Not all the new ones, some of the new ones, and I still found that's fascinating. Like the latest Demon Slayer, like top the charts. That's like one of my top 5. As soon as I finish watching it, yeah, man.
Yeah. No, I'm right there with you, man. My buddy, he like, well, both my close friends are really heavily into anime, and for years they were trying to get me into watching, because I grew up on like Dragon Ball Z as well, and all that stuff. But for years they were trying to get me to watch what is it, Avatar, right? And the way it looked, I needed a little bit of convincing because it didn't look like how a typical anime, or can you even call that anime? Like is Avatar considered? Yeah. So when I first saw it, I was like, yo, this looks so, like the trailers made it look so kiddish and corny, and so I wasn't super interested in it. And then my boy was just like, no, like, because he knows that I'm on like a spiritual journey right now and everything, and so about maybe 3 or 4 years ago, he finally convinced me. He was like, no, you have to watch this show. Like, just get through the first couple of episodes of the first season, and you'll be hooked, and you'll see why you really enjoy it. And I got through it and really ended up liking it. And like one of the big draws for me was Uncle Iroh, because like you were saying, how like a lot of these animes, like they go into really deep content. And I think you actually made a post like way back on your Instagram about the when Ang goes to visit, he visits some guru, and the guru is talking to him about the chakras. And I was like, when I got to that point, I was like, this is a kids show. I was
Yeah.
blown away by like how deep and rich the content was in terms of how they were, like what they were talking about, and everything. And so from there I was hooked and like finished the season. I even went on to watch Legend of Korra. And yeah, I love anime for that reason, in terms of how deep they get into the lore of the content that they're talking about. And it's a lot of life lessons that you can take from these animes that are not they're not comparable to any of the cartoons, like the American cartoons that you have out now, that are just all mindless entertainment with no substance. So yeah, man.
100%. It's like they take those complex topics and make it so simple for children to understand. And yeah, growing up with these things kind of got ingrained in our brain. I feel like you grow up with anime, but these little subtle messages, they stick on. And I feel like nowadays it's very much related to what I do now. Like all this spirituality stuff and energies and chakras, whatever you want to name them, they're very much real, right? And maybe it doesn't demonstrate itself in the physical as they show in anime. Like you're not gonna do a freaking kamehameha out of your hands,
Yeah.
right? Nonetheless, it doesn't mean that you can't use Tai Chi and Qigong principles to kind of rebalance your internal energies and use that internal fire to power your martial arts or whatever movement practice you want to do. And all these things, they're demonstrated in anime and kids shows, but a lot of adults, they don't realize it. So they brush it.
Yeah, and it's like I think because if you have a closed mind, you might write that off as like this woo woo type of like, what are you talking about? Like I can channel and harness my energy. Like, but people don't realize that science has already proven that we are energetic beings, right? It's just we're waiting for the data to catch up with like everything else, right? And um I think that like that alone should tell you how much power you have at your disposal in terms of your ability to manifest certain things based off of energy. Because if everything is energy and we're all connected to everything else, then you know it stands to reason that we have more control than we actually logically think, right? And so I was having a conversation with a friend of mine where I was telling him like because I was having these thoughts and I was like something like your phone, like the iPhone, for example. Like this was once a thought in somebody's head, and now it's a physical, tangible thing. And it's just like think about that for a second. It's like a thought transformed into something tangible that you can physically see, touch, smell, hear, taste, whatever, right? So um that just goes to show the power of the human mind and the ability that we have to harness and transmute our energy into something bigger than ourselves, right?
100%. And I find the thing that's difficult is because you can't see it. You can't see it,
Mhm.
you can't touch it, and it's very difficult to feel. So people brush it off as non-existent.
Mhm.
Science
Yeah.
did that many years before. They didn't understand. They were
Mhm.
studying ancient Chinese martial arts and
Mhm.
Japanese practices and ancient practices in Kemet, and they would talk about these energetic channels. And so science was
Mhm.
like, well, we have no way of measuring that. That must not exist. This is bullshit.
Mhm.
So they put it in a
Yeah.
box.
Mhm.
And it's hard for humans because we can't see it, we can't smell it, we can't touch it.
Mhm.
But what's great about anime is that they actually show it to you with animations
Yeah.
and symbologies that these things
Yeah.
are actually here, right? And
Yeah.
as a kid, I feel like part of it I was drawn to it because intuitively I knew that there's some truth behind it.
Mhm.
So, but yeah, man, I definitely agree with what you said.
Yeah. And I mean to your point too, like you make a really good point because I don't know if you had a chance to read the book The Subtle Bodies, but they highlighted something that I'd never it should be common sense or common knowledge, but I never really took it in until I saw it in print. And they were saying how like Western medicine and Eastern medicine are both energetic practices. It's just, they're like, the pharmaceutical company likes to create this divide. So much what you were saying, how like if you can't prove something that's like with tangible devices, then they push it to the side of Eastern medicine because they don't science doesn't have the data to really solidify or back up the claims, right? But they point out in the book that at one point there was a one point in time where like something like an x-ray didn't exist, and yet or like an MRI or something, but they used certain devices in Eastern medicine to determine or to see certain things that were wrong with the body. And it was later on that science eventually developed and like evolved to the point where they created these devices where they could see these tangible things that were happening. So it was like we're basically now waiting for Western medicine to catch up with Eastern medicine, because Eastern medicine already knows how to tap into a lot of these things that we can't physically see with the naked eye. But Western medicine still has to stick to protocol and says, okay, well, put it this way, from a doctor's perspective, a doctor can't have a patient come in and then say, and have the doctor say, oh, there's something wrong with your chakras. Something is not aligned. So that's the reason why you have cancer or whatever the case. I get that because, you know, people like absolutes. They need to know to have tangible things and stuff. And so that's kind of where the divide is. But I think that because Western medicine hasn't yet caught up, there is still going to always be this separation until we can figure out a way to kind of prove some of these methods, right? But at the same time, the proof is in the pudding when you go to an Eastern medical practitioner who is an expert at this stuff and can heal your body based off of the utilization of your own energy anyway, right? Through qigong, like what you're exposed to, and other Eastern medicine practices like acupuncture or acupressure. and other things of that nature. Like cupping is another thing, right? So
Mhm.
I don't know, man. It's
Yeah, 100%. The reality
yeah,
is science is really young. Science is super
yeah,
young in comparison
yeah,
to humanity and the knowledge bank that we have so far from Eastern
hmm,
philosophy and dating back to ancient Africa. It's all very
hmm,
similar, using different systems or languages to describe the same thing.
hmm,
And it's comparable to, if you look at some indigenous cultures like the Dogon from Western Africa. I don't know if
hmm.
you're familiar with them, but the
No, I'm not familiar.
Dogon is an ancient tribe in Africa, and basically they're extremely advanced in astronomy, the stars, planetary alignments.
Mm,
Um, they have extreme knowledge of mathematics.
hmm,
Uh, And it's only now or recently that science is able to confirm whatever they've been saying for thousands of years. Uh, that's especially true with the planet Sirius, Sirius A. I think that's what it's called, Sirius. But anyway, they said they could pinpoint with exact precision where Sirius was located and what it was doing in the planetary system. And
mm,
when the Western scientists first asked them this question, they were baffled because they had no way of proving it, so they kind of shoved it aside as kind of some BS. But it's only in recent years that we developed telescopes advanced enough in order to detect that planet that they were talking about thousands of years ago. So the
wow.
question is, how do they know? How do they know
Hmm.
any advanced technologies that we have now? Right?
Yeah.
It's There's certain things that humanity knows that science cannot necessarily measure or prove. But that does not
Hmm.
necessarily mean it's not true. Just because you can't
Yeah.
see, feel it, you can't touch it, doesn't mean that it's true.
Yeah.
And so the young science was used to putting those things aside instead of
Hmm.
um, leaving them out there for probability. And it's only now
Hmm.
with quantum physics that it's catching up. It's like quantum physics
Right.
is like everything is connected. Oh shit.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And quantum physics goes deep, man. I'm still trying to wrap my head and conceptualize a lot of the things that they're talking about, and it it only further feeds into my curiosity and my fascination for it because they talk about, um alternate universes or parallel universes being related to the quantum field or the quantum physics, and that two atoms can exist at the same time, and we're essentially made up of atoms. So potentially there could be another version of you consciously in another universe living an alternate life, which is so mind-boggling to me because now you see things like in Spider-Man No Way Home, like they're talking about the multiverse and all this shit, and like the MCU is getting into that whole world now too. So I'm like, now this shit's not even a fantasy anymore. Like there's some actual evidence that suggests that this is a thing. So it's fascinating to me.
It is. It for sure is. It's no longer woo, as people love to call it, and
Yeah.
dismiss. I love that stuff. I personally love it. Like I'm curious about it.
Hmm.
That's why I kind of
Hmm.
keep myself. It's purely out of curiosity.
Yeah. Yeah. Where do you want to see like all this stuff go in terms of Eastern medicine? Because I know you came from a pharmaceutical background and have since left that, and you're more into like the holistic side of healing and living an optimal lifestyle, right? So where do you want to see things progress over time within your lifetime?
In terms of Western medicine, medicine in general.
Yeah, like yeah, just in terms of all of that, and like because I know you have your background in that as well. So where would you want to see it evolve to, if at all?
Yeah. So being in the Western, like immersed in the Western medical field, it's you get a very unique vantage point where you can see the ins and outs of the systems. You can see its benefits, but you can also see its downsides.
Mm,
So where I see a lot of good from the Western medicine medical field right now is in acute care. So if somebody needs like life-saving surgery, or somebody was in an acute um, life-threatening accident or whatever.
Mhm.
Western medicine is really good at fixing people in acute situations. But when it comes to
Mm.
chronic illnesses that we see so prevalent today, like diabetes and heart disease and obesity and whatever, people are pretty sick nowadays, especially in America.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so that's what I find Western medicine lacks in capabilities, is with dealing with those chronic issues, because especially with the pharmaceuticals, like if somebody comes with you to Western medical system with like diabetes or heart issues, they will often get prescribed pills that simply mask the symptoms instead of digging down into the root cause of what's actually
Mhm.
causing your insulin
Mhm.
sensitivity. Unless you were born with it, of course, that's different. But what's causing your heart issues? What's causing your
Mhm.
uh, ability to digest food properly? What is causing you
Mhm.
to not insulin appropriately? It's
Mhm.
not just all like fixing the symptom. Let me give you a pill so that your blood sugar goes to the normal level now, but you're still messed up at the deep down level, right?
Mhm.
So Western medicine is not good with managing chronic illnesses. It does not go to
Mhm.
the root cause of these things, and that's where I find the issue. And I'm really hoping that with the advance of science and more understanding, that we become better at managing these chronic ailments and actually going down to the root causes
Mhm.
that that make people sick, so that they can get better from the inside out instead of just masking the
Mhm.
symptoms on the surface.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with that. I read a book called The Energy Codes, and she has a line in the book where the author has a line in the book where she says that um, majority of chronic illnesses are stem from an energy issue before it becomes a tissue issue. So energetically, there's a disturbance or some kind of dysfunction happening on an energetic level, and then that energy, that lack of energy or that lack of flow kind of bleeds outwardly and starts to affect your physical body before like it affects your energetic body first, and then it manifests outwardly and affects your physical body. And so we often will mask the physical stuff, but that's the outer layer of our shell. And so there's the issue still remains on an energetic layer, and we haven't yet tapped into that or addressed that. So I 100% agree with you on that, in the sense of we have to work from the inside out.
I believe that, and that's the
Mm.
thing with Western medicine too, is that we can't really detect when something is wrong before something is broken.
Mhm.
Like the system only detects um, that there's something wrong when it's already
Mhm.
kind of too late. Like you're in the later
Yeah.
stage.
Yeah.
It's already physical. You're already getting that many
Mhm.
symptoms. Your organs are
Yeah.
already functioning in some sense.
Mhm.
So whereas if you go to the Eastern medical system, they can detect some issues even before it shows up in the blood work or imaging
Mhm.
somehow.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, I still think Western medicine has a long way to go, but
Mhm.
um, yeah, I'm hoping with quantum physics and the internet and the science, as things seem to be advancing super fast now. So
Mhm.
I'm
Yeah.
excited where it's gonna go.
Yeah, and it's good because like people like yourself who especially people like yourself who has a background in Western medicine and has made the transition, excuse me, to more of an Eastern way of living, sees it from both sides and can kind of play the middleman, because like you said, there are a lot of benefits that come from Western medicine, but you know, I think because of how far advanced or how far ahead Eastern medicine is, that might be a more favorable way of more favorable method for treating certain ailments, like you said, even before they become pronounced in the physical body. So, that's why, that's part of the reason why I wanted to have you on the podcast, and just like, because you're such a wealth of knowledge and you have so much to share on both ends of the spectrum. And you know, the work that you're putting out is phenomenal, just from like your movement practice to the knowledge that you drop on a holistic level. And I think more people need to do that and get involved in that and do their part in promoting this knowledge, because the more people know about it, especially people within your close circle, the more that they can benefit from living a healthy, sustainable life.
100%. I agree.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Well, we're coming up on time. There's so many other questions I want to ask you, but we'll save it for the next time I have you on the show for sure, because there's, you know, we could get into so many different things, from going into different directions and whatnot. And as you know, quantum physics alone is like a topic in itself for a whole hour or even longer. So before I do let you go though, there are two questions I want to ask. Well, one question, and then basically I'll leave the floor open to you to kind of promote any projects that you're working on and whatnot. But in your own words, how would you define flow?
Okay, that's always been quite difficult. Flow, I would define it somewhere in between chaos and control.
Mm.
So, chaos meaning control means having enough comfort at a certain scale or whatever task that you're doing that you can actually perform it. Chaos meaning enough challenge to keep you engaged and your neurons working and thinking. So flow, I see it like in between of extreme spectrums of extreme, and I like to define them as chaos and control. So when you're somewhere in the middle, that's when you find that flow state. It's like, for example, you're playing a basketball game, and the chaos part is that everything's unpredictable, and you're playing against the other team. Everything's chaotic, but the control part is all the thousands of hours you've put into handling the basketball and playing with your team. So you have control with your team and yourself, but you have the unpredictability and chaos of facing the other opponent and team. So that way, bringing the two together, you go into this flow state of flow.
I like that, man. I like that
How
a
would you?
lot, man. Similar thing, man. I mean, for me, flow has always been kind of like a combination of tension and relaxation, right? So it's that push and pull, or that marrying effect between the two, that allows you to find your center, essentially, right? So I think you benefit from both sides of the spectrum, but you just can't reside there for very long, right? We need a little bit of tension in order to progress and to move ourselves forward, and move the needle forward, essentially, right? Like, a lot of people are under the impression that they have to avoid stressful scenarios, right? Whereas stress is basically just it gets a bad rep, but it's basically something that's needed for us to take action on something, right? When you experience some sort of agitation, let's say, for example, you're hungry and your belly rumbles, that's a form of stress, right? Obviously, if it prolongs over a long period of time, then that can be a little bit chaotic. But if it's just a minor agitation, then it might be the stress that you need to get up and go get yourself something to eat. Or if you have to go to the bathroom, right? Small agitation, you get up and you relieve yourself, right? So that, in that regard, that tension is good in small micro doses, right? And then on the other side of the spectrum, we have the relaxation, right? Sometimes we need a little bit of relaxation, because that's how we regenerate and replenish our nervous system, right? Too much relaxation, though, can cause stagnation. It leaves us in one place, leaves us stuck. Or in terms of energy and flow, in that regard, you know, too much stagnation can accumulate and build and lead to like illnesses and things of that nature, right? So we need a mix of both, but not too much of either one, right? So when we find ourselves in that center, it's a mix of both of those two sides, right? It's like, I almost think of it kind of like a pendulum, where it's like you start a pendulum and it swings back and forth, right? But there's always movement happening on both sides. But then when you find your center, that's where you want to be, right? In between those 2 points. So
That's a good one.
that to
I
me
like
is
that.
what flow is. Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, man. All right, man. So the floor is yours to share, to share whatever things you got going on in terms of projects. I'm gonna have all your details in the description anyway later on when this episode comes out. But yeah, like let the people know what you're working on, where they can find you, and all that jazz, man.
Yeah, the platform that I use the most is Instagram. So people can find me at Rewiring the System.
Yeah.
Uh, in terms of projects, one big project I have coming up in the new year is there's a company called Othership that's opening up its second location downtown Toronto, and it's essentially going to be a 50-person sauna, infrared sauna, as well as
Oh
cold
shit.
plunging.
Oh
So they're
snap.
in the second week of January in the upcoming
Mm-hmm.
year. And so I'll be there guiding some cold and hot sessions for people that want to strengthen their mind, um, decrease inflammation, all the kind of benefits of the hot and cold therapy. So I'll be there as a guide starting from mid-January.
Is this gonna
So
be an
yeah,
ongoing thing or just a one-off thing for you?
that's going to be an ongoing thing. Yeah, I'm not sure
Okay,
which days
perfect.
yet, but I'll be working with the company alongside
Okay,
you
sweet.
guys.
I- I'm gonna make sure that I have this episode out around that time, if possible, just so I can generate some buzz. And count me in for that, man, for sure. I wanna show up for that.
Amazing. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Second week of January,
sounds
downtown
good,
Toronto.
man. Wicked.
Yeah,
And that's it. Those are the
yeah,
two
really,
things that you're working on. Yeah.
that's the biggest project. Otherwise, I'm still trying to figure my life out of where to go, um, what to create next. What I do
Mm-hmm.
on the side now is kind of guide people that want to dig deep into their health and
Mm-hmm.
wellness journey.
Mm-hmm.
So if people are looking to work on their nutrition, on their movement, I do that one on one based on my experiences
Mm-hmm.
and knowledge. Otherwise, yeah, man, that's it.
Awesome, awesome, man. Well, just want to say, man, I love the work that you do, and I want to see you do more stuff. I want you to put yourself out there more because you're one of the one of many people that I follow that I truly respect in terms of what they represent and what they're all about. And it's been a true honor to have you on the podcast and to share your vision and your perspective on everything. And I definitely want to get you on again so we can go dive in even deeper because I know you're a wealth of knowledge. And I just just keep doing what you're doing, man. And I hope the sky's the limit for you, and I hope that you excel in everything, all your endeavors that you're going after, man. So thank you again for being on the podcast.
I appreciate you, man. Appreciate you. It's always nice to connect with a fellow weirdo
Yeah,
and
man.
dancer.
Likewise,
Yeah,
bro. We got to get together and train now, though, man. Like, we gotta
it's
we gotta make that happen. I'm gonna try and make it out to Shinobi Village one of these days over the holidays, and maybe we'll link up there.
yeah. Come by. It's an amazing place.
Yeah.
We can do so many things there.
For sure, man. For sure. Well, this has been another episode of the Fine Folk podcast. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.